If you're a fanatic of the unknown, unfamiliar, and enjoy creepy tales in story format, then welcome to Gravesend. We upload 1 to 2 times weekly, so hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to ring that bell for all notifications. Now on with our story. With spring right around the corner, Charlie's dad decided to go ahead and install the backyard fence. That's so Charlie, who's only 4, and Riley, a chocolate Labrador, could play outside and stay safe. The family rescued Riley from his shelter as a pup shortly after Charlie was born. So they both have basically grown up together, they love each other, and Riley is very protective over Charlie. Charlie and Riley would go outside and play in the backyard every afternoon when Charlie got home. His mom would sit out on the patio to watch them and do a little reading. Charlie's mom, Megan, began to notice Riley digging near one of the fence posts. She was afraid he would dig too deep and create a hole underneath the fence, so she went out to see what he was digging. She walked out and saw several bones where Riley was digging. She immediately made Charlie and Riley go inside. Now, as soon as Charlie's dad, Robert, got home, his mom mentioned the bones Riley had dug up in the backyard. Robert went out to take a look and said he thought they were animal bones, possibly from a previous owner who had buried a pet. He removed the bones where Riley was digging and filled the hole back in. He decided the best thing to do was to place the bones in a bag and put them in the trash can outside to be picked up at the end of the week. Megan had finished dinner and called everyone in to eat. Robert asked Charlie how daycare was, and Charlie started telling his dad about Riley digging up the bones outside. Megan quickly changed the subject and said she had an interesting day at work. Before Megan could complete her thought, they heard Riley yelping and crying outside as if he was in pain. Now Robert ran to the sliding door and saw Riley being jerked around and pulled across the yard by a much larger dog. Robert pulled the door open and yelled Riley's name. The much larger and aggressive dog attacking Riley stopped and stood there, growling and fixated on Robert. Robert turned to grab the flashlight and the shovel as he went out the door. When Robert focused his attention back to the dog, it was gone. He assumed he must have jumped over the fence and took off. Now, not knowing where the dog was, he scooped Riley up and took him inside. Riley had gashes all over his body. Robert put him in the car and immediately took him to the vet. The vet said the wounds appeared to have been made by another dog. Riley was in severe pain, but the vet said he would be okay. She gave them salve for the gashes and told them to keep him inside until he healed. With this wild dog roaming around, Megan was very concerned about any of them going outside. She was very upset with what happened and decided to take the day off work. She knew they needed something to defend themselves in case this ever happened, so she went to a local gun store and purchased a .22 rifle. When she got home, she locked the rifle in the closet so Charlie couldn't get to it. She then decided to go take a shower, and as soon as she got in, Riley come running in the bathroom, hunkered down with his tail between his legs, crying, whimpering. Megan pulled the shower curtain back to see what was wrong, and Riley started trying to get in the shower. She then heard growling, and this caught her off guard, especially since Riley was in the bathroom and no other animals were inside the house. She became terrified and froze in her tracks. Was someone else in the house? Did someone else bring a dog in the house? She just stands there not knowing what to do. She could hear the nails of a dog on the hardwood floor begin running toward the bathroom. She ran over and slammed the door, and just as she did, a dog started barking and scratching its paws on the bathroom door. Now Megan was confused about how he got inside. All the doors were shut and locked, no windows were open. Then she had a chilling thought. Where's Charlie? She grabbed the doorknob but then remembered he was still at daycare. Her phone was in the kitchen, so she had no way to call for help. She looked around the bathroom and saw the window. As she was trying to get it open, she realized everything was quiet. There was no more growling or scratching at the door. She waited a few minutes, then with a shaking hand grabbed the doorknob and slowly opened the door. She stuck her head out, looking up and down the hall. She knew she needed to get to the closet where she had put the rifle. Megan was so scared she could barely move, but she knew she had to get to that closet. She made a run for it and grabbed the key off the nail at the top and finally got it unlocked. She grabbed the rifle, then started checking the house, slowly, room by room. The front and back doors were still shut and locked. She searched the entire house and there was no sign of another dog. She began wondering if she just imagined the whole thing, but then she saw the claw marks on the bathroom door. She called Robert and told him what happened. She was frantic and terrified. She didn't want to go outside, but she had to pick Charlie up from daycare. She and Riley cautiously made it out to the garage. She opened the car door and they both jumped inside. When she picked Charlie up, she knew she couldn't take him home. He couldn't go back to the house. She knew he wouldn't be safe. She decided to take him to his grandparents until this dog was caught. Charlie wanted Riley to stay with him, and Megan thought this would be best. Riley wasn't safe at the house either. Besides, she knew Riley would protect Charlie no matter what. After dropping Charlie and Riley off at their grandparents', Megan started her drive home and started thinking about how this dog got inside the house. She then remembered the bones Riley had dug up in the backyard and wondered if this had anything to do with this mysterious dog. Once she arrived at home, Robert was already there. She ran inside and he was looking at the claw marks on the bathroom door. Robert wasn't really sure what they were dealing with. The claw marks were from the top of the door to the bottom and deep inside the wood. He knew if the dog had not left when it did, he would have gotten inside the bathroom. Megan handed the rifle to Robert and told him they needed it for protection. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about what had happened and trying to figure out how the dog got inside. They explored every possible scenario they could think of, but nothing made sense. They were getting ready for bed, and since Charlie wasn't there, they decided to bring the rifle in the bedroom and set it up against the wall beside the bed just in case the dog came back. Megan was so scared she lay in bed just listening and jumping at every little sound. She finally decided to turn the TV on to distract her mind and maybe help her fall asleep. Around 1 a.m., she finally drifted off. She was awakened by something that sounded like a low growl. She grabbed the remote and muted the TV. She could hear the dog coming down the hallway. Megan was paralyzed in fear. She couldn't move. She couldn't scream. Robert wasn't moving. He was still asleep. As she lay there, unable to alert her husband of what was happening, she noticed the picture on the TV start flickering. Even though she had muted the TV, the volume was now back on and the sound was distorted, making an eerie screeching sound. The dog was now standing in the doorway, growling at Megan. She could see his teeth and foam coming from his mouth. She then realized the features of the dog didn't resemble any dog she had ever seen before. It looked as if the fur was matted, but blurry at the same time. The legs were abnormally long, and the dog didn't have a tail. The body looked disfigured and misshaped. What stood out the most was its pitch black eyes. Megan was fixated on the dog as she lay there unable to move. The dog began twitching in and out of sight. All of a sudden, there's a hellish growl and the dog leaps toward Megan to attack. Now, just as the dog leapt, Robert woke up and threw himself on Megan to protect her. Megan could still see the dog, and just before his claws dug into Robert's back, the dog faded away. She could still hear the growling, but she couldn't see the dog. Now, Megan was in shock. She started screaming for Robert to get off her. Her words weren't making sense, and Robert couldn't understand anything she was saying. When he realized the dog was no longer a threat, he jumped up and turned the lights on. He grabbed Megan and told her to calm down. Megan started to describe what the beast looked like and told Robert it definitely was not a dog. It was unworldly. This was something paranormal and just too much for either one of them to embrace. And of course, they weren't able to go back to sleep at all that night. The next morning, Megan reached out to the previous owner of the house. She asked if anything strange had happened while they were living there, and the man told her no. There was nothing strange, nothing out of the ordinary. Megan started telling him about the dog getting into the house and attacking them. The man assured Megan nothing like that ever happened while they were living there, and they didn't even have a dog when they lived in the house. He told her he did have a dog when he was a child that caught rabies and became aggressive, so his father had put him down and buried him in the backyard. Megan thanked the man for taking her call and said goodbye. This made Megan think about the bones Riley had dug up. She started telling Robert what the man had said about the dog with rabies and burying the dog in the backyard. With no other explanation of what had happened or how the dog got inside the house, they began to believe this had to be paranormal. The bones Riley dug up somehow awoken the animal spirit, and the rabies would explain the constant aggression the beast was showing. Without giving it another thought, Robert went and dug the bones out of the trash can. Now, they didn't want the bones in the backyard, so they decided to take them to the woods and bury them. Just as Robert started digging, Megan seen the ghost dog appear from nowhere, and it just started running toward Robert to attack him. Megan pulled the rifle up and fired a shot at the dog just as he leapt toward Robert. The bullet had no impact. It went straight through the dog as he landed on Robert, knocking him to the ground. The beast latched onto Robert's arm and began pulling him. Megan threw the rifle on the ground and started running toward Robert and the dog. Robert started yelling at Megan to bury the bones and cover them. She grabbed the bag of bones, then the beast turned his attention toward Megan. She fell to her knees as the dog began leaping toward her. She started scooping the dirt as fast as she could and putting it on top of the bones. And as soon as the bones were covered, the dog disappeared. Megan crawled over to Robert, and they both just sat there for a few minutes in disbelief, wondering if he was coming back. They both got to their feet and started limping toward the house. Although Robert's arm was bleeding badly and he was in severe pain, he told Megan there was one more thing they needed to do. Robert gathered some of the fencing he had left and installed it around the area where the bones were buried. He eventually placed a plaque with the following warning: "Do not disturb these grounds. The beast from hell lies here. Disturbing these bones will be a terror unleashed." Thank you for joining us, and we hope you liked today's story. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button at the bottom, or the hell beast may unleash terror on you.